Let me take you back to Madrid, 1976, in the heart of one of its most vibrant neighborhoods, Malasaña. Now Malasaña is a place filled with life, people laughing in cafes, children playing in the streets, and the warm Spanish sun glowing over everything. But what happens when that warmth fades, when the heart of the city beats alongside something sinister? This is where our story begins. Meet the Olmedo family. They're your typical hardworking family, looking for a fresh start. After years of struggling in a small village, they decide to move to the big city, excited by the endless possibilities that Madrid promises. The father, Manolo, is the kind of man who's always kept his head down and worked hard for his family. Candela, his wife, is strong, resilient, and the glue holding them all together. Their 3 children, Amparo, the eldest daughter, Pepe, the adventurous son, and Rafael, the youngest, who still clings to childhood innocence, are just as excited for the change. Finally, there's the grandfather, Fermin, who, though aging, brings a sense of wisdom and calm to the family. The apartment they've found at 32 Malasaña Street is large, far larger than they ever expected they could afford. It's old, yes, and maybe a little run down, but its size and location seem like a dream. And for a family of 6, they couldn't have asked for better. The high ceilings, the large windows, the view overlooking the bustling street below, it's the kind of place where a family could start fresh, or so they thought. Right from the beginning, though, there's something off about the apartment. On the day they move in, the air inside feels heavier than it should, and the place seems far too cold for a summer day in Madrid. But they're excited. Nothing will dampen their spirits. They chalk it up to the apartment being old and decide it just needs some life to fill it again. But as night falls on their first evening in the new home, that sense of unease begins to grow. Rafael, the youngest, is the first to feel it. He's a sensitive boy, still in tune with things that adults tend to overlook. While the rest of the family is busy unpacking, Rafael explores the apartment on his own, wandering into the darker, more isolated corners of the house. As he steps into a narrow hallway at the far end of the apartment, he feels it. Something watching him. At first, it's just a strange sensation, like the air has thickened around him. But as he turns to go back to the main room, he sees it. A shadow at the end of the hallway. Not the kind of shadow you'd expect from a trick of the light. This shadow is dense, like it's alive, and it's slowly creeping toward him. Rafael freezes. He's not sure if he should run or scream. But just as the shadow seems to be within arm's reach, it disappears. He rushes back to his family, terrified. But when he tries to explain what he saw, they laugh it off as a child's overactive imagination. But Rafael knows what he saw. Days go by, and small, unsettling things start happening. Little things at first. Doors that were closed suddenly swing open on their own. Objects seem to move from one place to another when no one's looking. The lights flicker constantly, even though the wiring was just checked. The apartment itself seems to groan, as if the walls are shifting, almost breathing. Amparo, the eldest daughter, starts to feel a presence when she's alone. It begins when she finds an old mirror tucked away in one of the closets. It's a strange antique thing, covered in dust, with intricate carvings around the edges. She cleans it and hangs it in her room, but almost immediately she starts to feel uneasy. Every time she looks into the mirror, it's as though someone, or something, is staring back at her, but from inside the mirror. One night, as she's brushing her hair, Amparo notices movement in the reflection, not behind her, but inside the mirror itself. A dark figure seems to glide past the edges of the glass, just for a second, but long enough to send a chill down her spine. She turns, and of course there's nothing there. But the reflection, it lingers, just at the edge of the mirror, like it's waiting. As the days pass, the activity escalates. The family begins hearing strange noises at night, footsteps coming from the upper floors when no one is upstairs, distant whispers that seem to echo through the apartment, but the words are indecipherable. Then, there are the cold spots. Frigid areas that appear suddenly and disappear just as quickly. Candela, the mother, begins to notice the changes in her children, especially Amparo, who has become increasingly withdrawn, spending more time alone in her room, avoiding the mirror but unable to remove it. The breaking point comes one night when the entire family is gathered in the living room. It's late, and they're trying to relax after another long, stressful day of unpacking and settling in. Suddenly, the television turns on by itself. The screen flickers with static, and for a moment they think it's just faulty wiring. But then, images start to appear. Grainy, distorted images of people, old footage of past residents of the building. They don't recognize any of the faces, but the scenes are unsettling, filled with eerie smiles and distant eyes. Then, without warning, the screen goes black, and a deep, low voice echoes through the room, muttering something unintelligible, but undeniably threatening. Terrified, they rush to turn off the TV, but nothing works. The remote won't respond. The buttons on the TV are useless. The voice grows louder, the air in the room becomes stifling, and just as they think they can't take it anymore, the screen flickers off as suddenly as it had turned on. The family sits in stunned silence. Manolo, the father, decides it's time to do something. They've had enough of these strange occurrences. He starts to dig into the history of the building, desperate to find answers. What he discovers is more horrifying than he could have imagined. Decades ago, the apartment at Malasaña 32 had been the scene of numerous tragedies. It turns out the building was once home to a deranged woman who had practiced dark rituals, trying to contact the spirits of the dead. She believed the apartment was a gateway to the spirit world, and her actions left a permanent stain on the place. The more Manolo reads, the clearer it becomes. Every family that had lived in this apartment before them had either disappeared or met with tragic, untimely deaths. Suddenly, everything clicks into place. The strange occurrences, the shadows, the feelings of dread. This apartment is cursed. Whatever dark energy resides here, it feeds on the people who live within its walls, drawing them into its nightmare. In a panic, the family decides to leave, to get as far away from the apartment as possible. But as they prepare to go, the apartment fights back. Strange forces seem to lock the doors, trapping them inside. The windows rattle violently, and an oppressive energy fills the air, making it nearly impossible to breathe. Desperate, they call in a priest, hoping for some kind of salvation. The priest arrives, and as he begins to bless the apartment, the building itself seems to come alive. The walls tremble, and a guttural voice reverberates through the rooms, mocking the prayers being spoken. The priest's face turns pale as he realizes the force they're dealing with is beyond anything he's encountered. In the final horrifying moments, the entity reveals itself in full. The shadows that once lingered in the corners now sweep through the apartment, taking form, a dark, twisted figure, its face a grotesque mix of anger and suffering. It moves toward the family with purpose, and they can feel its hatred, its desire to consume them. One by one, they are overwhelmed by the malevolent presence. Amparo is the first to be taken, pulled into the mirror that had haunted her for weeks. Her scream echoes through the apartment as her reflection is forever trapped on the other side. Fermin, the grandfather, who had always been frail, succumbs to a heart attack as the shadow figure towers over him, whispering ancient, cursed words into his ear. Manolo and Candela are left with their two sons, desperately trying to escape. But there is no escape from Malasaña 32. In a final act of horror, the entity swallows the family whole, their screams absorbed into the very walls of the apartment, their souls forever bound to its dark history. And now, the apartment waits once again, silent, still, until the next unsuspecting family steps through its doors. This is the story of Malasaña 32, a place where the boundaries between the living and the dead blur, and where once you enter, there may be no escape. So the next time you walk past an old building and you feel that strange chill or hear whispers in the quiet of night, Remember this story. Some places hold more than memories. Some places hold something far darker, waiting to claim its next victim.